Hello everyone, I'm Jack Fisher and welcome to my world. And as a lifelong fan of comic books, I like to think I value the true gems of the industry more than most. But even among those gems, some hold a uniquely special place in my heart. To me, they're more than just a damn good comic book. They're more than just an amazing story. These gems really touch me on a personal level. They evoke something in me and my fellow comic book fans that goes beyond the joy they bring. What makes them special varies, but the sheer power of their impact is what helps them stand out. And among the many gems I've read over the years, one special comic has left a unique impact on my comic-loving soul. And that comic is X-23 Innocence Lost by Craig Kyle and Chris Yost. Now, before I start gushing about this comic, I need to take a moment to acknowledge something important about the writers of this book. Because in addition to comics, these two men played instrumental roles in other Marvel media. That includes shows like X-Men Evolution and Wolverine and the X-Men, two shows that X-Men fans hold in very high regard. It's within one of those shows, namely X-Men Evolution, that they created X-23. If you've seen the Logan movie, you know who she is, but you might not know that she didn't originally appear in the comics. She actually made her debut in an episode of X-Men Evolution. And it was a powerful episode too, one full of heavy drama and genuinely heartbreaking moments. Any fan of that show will likely rank that episode as one of the best in the series. I certainly do. It's one of those cases where you just know a character is going to be a star the moment you see them. That's exactly how I felt about X-23 when I first saw her in X-Men Evolution. After that, it was only a matter of time before she showed up in the comics. And X-23 Innocence Lost is basically her origin story within the mainline comics. While it differs considerably from the show, the heart, soul, and tragedy of the character are perfectly captured. And make no mistake, the story of Laura X-23 Kinney is tragic. Much like her predecessor/father Wolverine, there's a lot of loss, anger, and violence. But what Innocence Lost does is give context to that greater tragedy. It also firmly establishes that X-23's journey will be very different from that of Wolverine. And that's critical because, pragmatically speaking, she's a clone. X-23 isn't even her code name. It's her designation. She doesn't get any other name until the very end of the story. She only exists because the same people who keep failing to control Wolverine still want a living weapon. And they just don't want to go through the trouble of capturing and brainwashing him anymore. They've long since learned that that never ends well. So they turn to Dr. Laura Kinney, a brilliant but troubled scientist who believes she has the answer. When Innocence Lost begins, the program is on a losing streak. They've been trying to clone Wolverine for years now, and so far, they've failed 22 times. Dr. Kinney is poised to succeed on the 23rd time. However, doing so comes at a high personal cost, one that only compounds as time goes on. Because the tragedy that befalls X-23 ultimately begins with Dr. Kinney. She lays the foundation with her ambition and recklessness. At first, she's so detached and callous, seeing X-23 as only a project to pursue. Then, when she has to act as a surrogate to carry X-23 to term, she becomes part of that effort in a very personal way. That process doesn't just put her through the usual rigors of pregnancy. It forces her to become attached to this program and the little girl it creates. She watches as this girl without a name is trained, conditioned, tortured, and dehumanized, transformed into a living weapon for the highest bidder. And along the way, we, the audience, watch her and X-23 endure these horrors together. And, unlike the original Weapon X program, this effort succeeds on a much larger scale. Under the guidance of Xander Rice, who is both the villain and the Omega-level asshole of this story, X-23 achieves far more than Wolverine ever did. After years of hardened training, as well as a round of painful adamantium bonding, X-23 becomes the ultimate killing machine. She's a preteen girl, but she's deadlier than entire platoons of soldiers. We see over the course of the story just how effective she is. If anything, being a young girl gives her a distinct advantage. Hell, who would think that such a sweet-looking girl could be so dangerous and deadly? And with each successful operation, the burden on Dr. Kinney grows and grows. And it's mostly through Dr. Kinney that we experience the personal upheavals of this story. And it's also through her that we share in the pain and loss. There's really only so much she can do from her position. For years, she just stands by and watches as this girl that she birthed becomes this ruthless killing machine. But that's still not enough for X-23's creators. There's an even bolder plan in the works, one that goes beyond anything Weapon X ever achieved with Wolverine. Eventually, Dr. Kinney sees the extent of Xander Rice's plans. She also sees that they're not entirely motivated by money or power either. And that's when she finally decides to do something about it. It's here where she and X-23 finally act. It's also here where the full extent of the tragedy takes hold. And that's what makes Innocence Lost such a special gem. Now, I won't spoil all of it. I'll just say that the way the story plays out still affects me to this day. I distinctly remember how I felt when I first read it. I vividly recall gasping at the final few pages. I actually had to cover my mouth and swallow a lump in my throat because it really was that powerful. It wasn't just the weight of the tragedy that hit me. It was the raw drama that had built up to that point. The amount of heart and humanity that went into it. X-23 may have begun as a cloning project. In fact, X-23 herself barely says a word over the course of the story. But when she finally does speak, it carries a lot of weight. And what she says at the end, it's truly heartbreaking. There are only a handful of comics that I've read that have genuinely brought me to tears. And X-23 Innocence Lost is among them. To me, it's more than just a great comic. It's more than just the origin story of a great character. It's an amazing journey for a character that's full of heart, hardship, and tragedy. It informs us so much of who Laura Kinney is and how she carries herself in the stories that follow. Since her debut in X-Men Evolution, Laura has become a very popular character in her own right. She's not just Wolverine's clone anymore. She is very much her own character with her own distinct identity. She has also become part of a larger family, both with Wolverine and with the rest of the X-Men. She was never supposed to have any of that. No name, no identity, no family, nothing. She was only supposed to be a living weapon. She had to fight hard to gain all of that, but it all still came at a terrible price. But she channels all these terrible things into becoming something better, something greater than her creators ever intended. And it all starts in Innocence Lost, this remarkable story that strikes all the right chords, some much harder than others. And to Craig Kyle and Chris Yost, on behalf of all X-Men fans, I cannot thank you enough for creating this character and telling this story. And to those who've yet to experience this story, I'll leave a link to Comixology and Amazon in the description. Fair warning though, you will need tissues. Thanks for watching everyone, and thanks for joining me in my world. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and stay tuned for more comic book gems. Until next time, take care and stay safe.